On the first day of the Yom Kippur War, on October 6, 1973, the Latakia Naval Operation unfolded. Egypt and Syria's surprise attack shook Israel. The Israeli Navy swiftly responded by dispatching missile boats armed with domestic anti-ship missiles that had not yet been battle-tested. In contrast, the Syrians, armed with battle-proven Soviet missiles, posed a threat. Israel's only hope was their innovative electronic countermeasure systems against the enemy, which had not seen actual combat either. The operation's objective was clear: thwart a potential Syrian naval strike along the Israeli Mediterranean coast by drawing Syrian vessels into open waters. In a daring move, the Israeli Navy placed its chips on the table and gambled everything on the success of a single audacious maneuver. In the autumn of 1973, the Middle East brewed with conflict. Known by various names, the Yom Kippur War, the Ramadan War, or the October War, the stage was set for a monumental clash between Israel and the Arab coalition led by Egypt and Syria. The battleground spanned the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, and even stretched to African Egypt and northern Israel. Egypt's aim was clear: secure a foothold on the eastern bank of the Suez Canal and use it as a bargaining chip for the return of the Sinai Peninsula from Israeli control. The confrontation finally began on October 6, 1973, when the Arab coalition struck Israel by surprise. The date aligned with Yom Kippur, a solemn Jewish holiday, and the 10th day of Ramadan, a Muslim month of religious observance. This unusual coincidence deepened the gravity of the conflict. As tensions escalated, global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, joined the fray. They raced to bolster their respective allies, risking a dangerous clash in their support. The conflict's true overture unfolded as Egyptian and Syrian forces crossed ceasefire lines, breaching into the Sinai Peninsula and Golan Heights. Egypt's Operation Badr saw them traverse the Suez Canal, gaining ground in the Sinai. Simultaneously, Syrian troops mounted an aggressive offensive to retake the Golan Heights from Israeli occupation. Meanwhile, Israel prepared for a strike that would redefine naval warfare forever. In the lead-up to the war, the Israeli Navy stood as the primary force, ready to engage and secure victory right from the war's outset. Although the Israeli Army and Air Force had achieved remarkable success in the 1967 conflict, the Navy faced a challenge. The Egyptian missile boats, armed with Soviet-built weaponry, posed a formidable threat. Previously, the Israeli destroyer Eilat fell victim to Egypt's anti-ship missiles, revealing the vulnerability of the Navy's position. This incident, which resulted in the loss of 47 sailors on the Eilat, accentuated the existing perception of the Navy's lower standing within the nation's military establishment. Driven by a desire to enhance its capabilities, the Israeli Navy drew inspiration from the India-Pakistan conflict and recognized the strategic value of incorporating guided missile FBS into its arsenal. The Navy realized that small vessels with advanced missiles held a distinct advantage over larger warships like destroyers and frigates, especially in the eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea's coastal waters. When the Yom Kippur War commenced, the Israeli Navy's assets included 14 Sa'ar-class missile boats. In contrast, Syria's naval forces comprised 3 Osa-class and 6 older Qamar-class missile boats, along with 11 torpedo boats and 2 minesweepers. The Israeli Navy meant to prevent any chance of Syria launching a naval attack along Israel's Mediterranean coast. This was part of the Latakia Operation. Israel had a plan in place. They wanted to tempt the Syrian missile boats to come out and then confront them from the farthest possible distance. The Israelis hoped to overcome the threat posed by the Syrian missiles using chaff and electronic countermeasures, or ECM. The strategy for the Latakia plan involved moving in a wide arc toward the west, heading toward Cyprus, an approach aimed to avoid detection by Syrian coastal radar and to come at the enemy from an unexpected direction, the north. On the first night of conflict, October 6th, the Israeli Navy was sent to engage the Syrian missile boats stationed in port. Primarily, the Israeli Navy's anti-ship missile, the Gabriel, had never been used in a real battle before, so its effectiveness against an actual enemy target was uncertain. Additionally, the Gabriel missile only had half the range of the Syrian missiles, specifically the Soviet SSN-2 Styx. And noticeably, the Styx missile had already proven its potency by sinking an Israeli destroyer 6 years earlier. To defend against the Styx missiles, the Israelis relied on electronic countermeasures that had also never been tested in real combat. If these countermeasures failed, the Israeli boats would be vulnerable to the radar-guided Styx missiles. Despite these challenges, the Israeli forces formed a task group, arranging their ships in 2 columns, 3 ships in the open sea, and 2 closer to the shore. Thus, they headed towards the Syrian port of Latakia. But soon, a surface contact to the north appeared on their radar screens. Uncertain of its intentions, the Israelis fired warning shots. The contact responded with some gunfire. The officer in charge, Commander Michael Barkai, ordered one of the ships, the Hanit, to engage the Syrian torpedo boat after identifying her. The Syrian boat was successfully taken down by the Hanit's long-range gun. Unsure if the Syrian boat had communicated their position, the Israelis hurried towards the shore, preparing for what was to come. As they moved closer to the coast, the radar picked up another contact, about 25 kilometers northeast of their position. The Israelis launched a Gabriel missile at her, but the target managed to escape out of range. The pursuit continued, and the Israeli ship, Reshef, fired a Gabriel missile at 18 kilometers, hitting the Syrian minesweeper. However, the biggest challenge was dealing with the Styx missiles. The Israelis kept heading towards Latakia. As they neared the coast, the radar detected 3 Syrian missile boats, 1 Osa and 2 Kamars, coming to confront them. The Syrians launched their missiles from a distance, which initially put the Israelis at a disadvantage. But as the Syrian missiles approached, the Israelis deployed their chaff rockets and jamming systems. The Israeli-developed devices sent out misleading signals to confuse the incoming missiles' guidance systems. This was the first time these systems were used in actual combat. Nobody knew if they would work. Before long, the outcome was clear. The electronic defenses had worked as intended. The Styx missiles either missed or plunged harmlessly into the sea. With confidence in their tactics, the Israelis continued their approach. Their strategy was to close in stealthily, allowing the enemy to fire their missiles from afar and then deploying countermeasures as the enemy missiles drew near. Among the Syrian boats, only Osa had missiles left. She turned to face the Israeli vessels, while the other 2 Kamars rushed towards the safety of Latakia. However, the Israelis were determined. They accelerated towards the Syrian boat and fired a barrage of Gabriel missiles. Their chaff and jamming systems effectively thwarted 2 more Styx missiles. The powerful warheads of the Gabriel missiles promptly sank the enemy missile boats. Following this battle, the Syrian Navy was confined to its home ports. However, that did not mean they would surrender. Having lost 3 missile boats, the Syrian Navy decided to avoid direct sea battles with the Israeli Navy. Instead, they used their missile boats from harbor entrances to launch attacks, relying on coastal artillery for protection. Hoping to draw the Syrian boats into open combat, Barkai would lead a night attack on Syrian ports. On October 11th, Commander Barkai divided his forces into 3 groups. 2 missile boats targeted the port of Banias, another 2 aimed at the Syrian naval base at Mina al-Baida, and the remaining 3 were assigned to attack Latakia once again. During the attack, Barkai instructed his boats to activate ECM and approach their targets at high speed. The Syrian radar operators were confused, thinking they were tracking multiple groups of ships instead of just the Israeli boats. The Syrian Navy sent missile boats from Banias and Latakia to attack the perceived targets. Upon reaching Latakia, the Israelis realized that the Syrian missile boats were using foreign merchant ships as cover, launching missiles from among these ships. Despite the risk of hitting the unarmed merchant vessels, the Israeli boats were ordered to engage the Syrian boats, which led to the sinking of 2 merchant ships, 1 Japanese and 1 Greek. During the battle, one of the Israeli boats evaded a missile, and the crew managed to shoot down another. The fight lasted for nearly 2 hours. The Israeli boats maneuvered around the port, trying to dodge attacks from Syrian boats and coastal artillery. They alternated between targeting the Syrian missile boats and aiming at the oil tanks on the shore. However, the Israeli boats failed to ignite any of the oil tanks and could only confirm potential hits on 1 Osa-class and 1 Kamar-class boat. Only the attack on the port of Banias succeeded in setting the oil tanks ablaze. The Israeli Navy, once a collection of outdated ships, showed its worth during a time when even the highly regarded Air Force and Armored Corps faced challenges. Israel's creative use of chaff and radar jammers set a lasting example of how ships can defend themselves. Interestingly, even the navies of Arab nations now employ the same tactics that Israel initially developed near Latakia. Israeli achievements in missile technology have significantly impacted naval warfare, specifically in terms of offensive and defensive capabilities, particularly in coastal combat scenarios. Instead of focusing solely on ship size and artillery, the emphasis shifted to the importance of missiles and their precision in combat, highlighting their remarkable power in dominating the oceans. The Israeli-designed Gabriel missile system performed exceptionally well. It excelled at detecting small targets, and while its range was limited, it gained significant recognition in the war rooms of various countries. Taiwan, Singapore, South Africa, and others currently use this system. Moreover, this showdown also marked the beginning of a new era in naval warfare, one heavily influenced by missiles and electronic strategies. So while these naval battles might not have tipped the scales of the Yom Kippur War, they definitely launched a revolution in how battles would be fought at sea. Actions like those off the Syrian coast on October 7, 1973, solidified Israel's reputation in missile boat warfare. They joined the ranks of elite military innovators and assumed a leadership role among this prestigious group. The battle introduced a whole new way of fighting at sea. For the first time ever, fast patrol boats armed with surface-to-surface missiles were engaging in combat. And it didn't stop there. Both sides dabbled in electronic warfare techniques, using tactics like chaff and electronic jamming. To stay effective, defensive tactics became crucial. Countermeasures like chaff to confuse enemy radar, electronic jamming to disrupt communications, and radar-absorbent paint to minimize detection became essential. Ships now operated based on the first-to-see, first-to-kill principle, highlighting the critical nature of early detection and rapid response. These advancements are vital in modern naval environments, where strategies to limit enemy access and control specific areas are prevalent. Additionally, the use of over-the-horizon systems has become widespread, especially in regions like the Pacific and the Middle East, where littoral and nearby operational zones are of prime importance. In the grand scheme of the Yom Kippur War, the naval battles, and particularly the small skirmish that was the Battle of Latakia, didn't significantly influence the overall outcome. Yet they sparked a remarkable shift in maritime tactics and technology, and marked a turning point in naval warfare.